So warm welcome to Strategic Governance for a Disrupted World, run by INSEAD Corporate Governance Centre and Boards Impact Forum. We will be here for 1.5 hours, and it's going to be a mix of a webinar and a digital dialogue. My name is Liselott Engstam. I'm the chair of Boards Impact Forum and also a board member of the Global Board of the Climate Governance Initiative by World Economic Forum. And I also sit on a number of commercial boards. I'm delighted to have the chance to open this webinar. And we will go through a short welcome and introduction. Then we will have some really interesting research findings and highlights that will be shared by Ron Soonieus and Claire Skinner. Following that, we have a panel of brave board directors that will share their views and perspectives with us. Following that, we will have a short poll to engage all of you participants here. And we will have an introduction to a discussion in breakout rooms where you will meet fellow international board directors and discuss these topics. And following that, you will come back and we will have the full panel sharing more insights with you from their experiences. And following that, we will have closing remarks by Sonia from INSEAD. So I just thought it was really pertinent, if you haven't noticed. So Boards Impact Forum is headquartered in Sweden. And this week onwards, we are welcoming all of the Nobel Prize laureates here to Stockholm. The Nobel Prize in the economic science, if you haven't noticed, is very interesting this year. And it's given to Acemoglu, Johnson, and Robinson for their studies in how institutions are formed and how it impacts future prosperity. And one of the key findings is that if the institutions are formatted as extractive, taking out the resources, either being natural resources or from the humans, it will be bad for a long-run growth of that entire country. If you're more establishing your way as a settler, you will have a chance to drive the economic freedom for both businesses and the country. The key takeaway is that boards do play a vital role to align strategies with both societal, environmental, and the business, and embracing an inclusive governance. This will be even more accentuated as we go forward in a disruptive world. You are all put on mute or will be put on mute. We have the chat box open. You're very welcome to introduce yourself. And Nanda Tora, the operations director, will be facilitating that. We ask you to avoid marketing. You're very welcome to share insights. If you are not recognizable by name, we will have to remove you before we start the breakout room. So it would be very nice if you can add your name or send a message to Fernanda so she would know. Respect that the discussions in the breakout rooms follow Chatham rules, which actually means that you can learn from what's said, but you cannot point out companies or people. And this webinar panel is being recorded, but it will not be recorded in the breakout rooms. So without further ado, we will start with a fantastic presentation by Ron Soonieus, who is the Senior Advisor to BCG and also the Director in Residence at INSEAD Corporate Governance Centre. And we have been running this webinar following the survey for 3 years now, and we're delighted to continue that collaboration. We're also delighted to welcome Claire Skinner, who is a partner and a global managing partner at Heidrick Consulting. Welcome to you both, and I think we start with you, Claire.
Thank you. And I'm just, first of all, thank you very much for the introduction and for the opportunity to join this panel. As you said, This is our third year of this survey and our collaboration with BCG and INSEAD Corporate Governance Centre. And we're really passionate about teaming up with our colleagues to understand how boards are really grappling with these complex trends and disruptions. And it's a personal passion of mine. I've been involved in this area for 30 years. So very much looking forward to, with Ron, presenting the results of this survey. So if we can jump to the first slide, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So here, I'm sure many of you will have read the report, but I just want to frame us in the survey. This was set up, we continue to run it as a global survey, and we are conducting it with directors and executives from around the world. And it's a senior group. The majority of the individuals surveyed have been serving on boards for over 5 years. And we are really engaging with leaders who are serving across a range of industries and across a range of enterprise sizes. So it's a wonderful group. And then we augmented the surveys and the results with a dozen or so roundtables. We had 130 directors participating in roundtables in North America, Europe, Southeast Asia, Africa, South America. And again, these were held under Chatham House rules, but it gave us an opportunity to get really good insights and for people to have a very open conversation. So we move on to the next slide and really sort of diving in to the results. There's reasons to be encouraged, I think. But it is clear, and all of you know, serving on boards, that the societal expectations for companies and therefore by extension for their directors has never been higher. And as you can see in these results, 80% of our respondents feel that boards have responsibility to address broader environmental and societal concerns, although over half of those still believe that business objectives should remain the primary focus. And we were discussing it earlier, and I think this is a fascinating moment in time because the survey was held pre the US election result, and it will be interesting to see how this sentiment evolves over the months and years ahead. But nonetheless, it is clear that this is very, very dynamic, and board members are confronting an increasingly long list of disruptions that they're needing to lead through, with the rising importance of generative AI, intensifying trade and geopolitical dynamics, and of course, as we know, across the full range of sustainability topics. And all of these issues are firmly on the board agenda. They're changing rapidly and continue to mean that board directors are operating in fields of significant uncertainty. And at the same time, you all have a very full board agenda that you're needing to work through, and you're needing to manage frequently conflicting demands and perspectives of diverse stakeholders, including diverse shareholder perspectives and activists, and all in an increasingly polarized world. So if we move on to the beginning of to frame our findings that Ron will lead us through in a moment. So we asked directors if their company has a clear understanding of how sustainability, Gen AI, and trade and geopolitics will affect the way value is created, and how much. And the good news is the healthy majority say that they strongly or somewhat agree that their company has a clear understanding of the effect of sustainability and trade and geopolitics. But when it comes to generative AI, unsurprisingly, given it's emerged relatively recently and is seen as a critical factor for performance, there is a view that directors have less confidence in their company's understanding. But when we dig deeper into some of those trends, energy and we see different trends across industries and sizes, with energy and utility companies have the highest level of confidence in sustainability topics, which is clearly unsurprising given that they are at the center of the energy transition. But on generative AI, the highest level of confidence was found in financial services and also larger companies with revenues over $10 billion. What was true across the board, though, is that in the pivot to looking around corners and anticipating how these trends will evolve and therefore how they will impact the business in the future, there's less confidence, with roughly half of our directors are not confident that their company has the muscle to scan horizons for threats and opportunities. And similarly, the survey reflects that the companies are struggling to develop strategies for translating the disruption into areas of genuine, competitive, sustainable advantage. And that is most stark in generative AI, where less than 40% strongly or somewhat agreed that their company understands how they're going to translate this into commercial advantage. So this, we think, points very strongly to how the board will need to continue to contribute to corporate strategy, and one that is aligned clearly to the company's articulated purpose. And this is critical now more than ever. So with that, I will hand over to Ron.
Thanks, Claire. And Lieslot, if you can go to the next slide. So with the introduction of Claire, this was basically our starting point for this year's research. We have been looking at sustainability in the past 2 years, but we found that, things are becoming increasingly complex. And we really wanted to get an understanding how boards are dealing with sustainability in a context where Gen AI, trade and geopolitical risks are clearly coming up as an important point. And I really wanted to start with the quote on the left-hand side of this slide, because this is really, this is a real quote from a director from a top 20 global bank, but it was sort of the undercurrent of all the conversations that we have had. It's becoming so complex and so uncertain to the world in which boards are navigating, that it becomes almost impossible to define what the right choice is to make, and then even if you somehow define what the right choice is, to actually be able to make those choices. So it's becoming increasingly complex. Through our findings, the main ones are on the right-hand side of the slide. I will quickly take you through. All the details are in the report, obviously. We just wanted to highlight a few here. We'll go through each and every of the main findings, and of that I will pick out a few things that we thought were interesting. Obviously, we can't deal with all of them in the time we have today, but everything is in the report, so I encourage you to read that. So if you can go to the next slide. The first thing we looked into is how is all this uncertainty affecting the way companies are allocating resources. And we looked into these 3 areas of sustainability. I don't know what happened with the Y. Gen AI and geopolitical. And it's interesting to see that both on sustainability and Gen AI, you see that investments in new technologies is in the top of the answers, as well as flexing resource allocation. And what we mean by flexing resource allocation is really finding dynamic ways of investing in long-term bets in a way so that you're not, if the long-term bet along the way starts to be showing not to be the right choice, that you're not stuck into an investment that is 30 years out or become stranded before it has been earned back. So anyway, so it's in the report you will find how we define it, but these are the interesting two that we saw there. Trade and geopolitical, flexible resource allocation as well in the top 3. But the other two we found quite interesting as a comparison to the other two is the diversification of corporate portfolio. We thought this was quite a high number, 30% of the directors saying that companies are either doing that or looking into diversifying corporate portfolio because of this. And diversifying supply chain is maybe not so surprising, but they are linked. I think for the time that we have given, I'll leave it at this, but it's interesting to see how boards are looking at this. So the next slide, Lieselot, we're going to looking at this, how boards are improving their own strategic reflection, because it becomes increasingly known to boards that you have to get some sort of grip of how the future is going to look like, and to be able to come close to what looks like a right choice. I'm being very careful here because everything changes every day. But and so we looked into this, and here there are not too many surprises in our view. So it is committing to ongoing board education and development. I mean, that has always been high on the agenda. It has been for many years, as well as the independent directors, independent advisors coming in on very specific topics. The board competency matrix is becoming increasingly important. We have tracked the board competency matrix over the last couple of years. And maybe Claire, you want to share a few thoughts on what we have seen there and what's happening on board competency matrices?
Yes, and I think, it continues to be, as all of you will know, an absolutely central part to any board effectiveness review is the breadth of skills and capabilities. But I think for us, what is increasingly showing that that boards are embedding sustainability competence across their board members and board committee chairs, particularly, rather than having a single sustainability or generative AI NED. And I think for us, never been more important that those individuals bring judgment, wisdom, and courage to those discussions beyond the competency matrix. That's what we're seeing more and more of in our board effectiveness reviews.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I think the other thing to notice is that, and we have talked about it in our previous reports as well, but we clearly see this coming up more and more, is the idea of advisory boards. We have worked on a few of them, and they are, the rates of success are fairly high, and it is a great way to get in more specific competence and more specific knowledge on topics, without having to have these people actually on the board and give them voting rights. So it is a really flexible way to enrich the knowledge of the board. And there is a clear difference between advisory boards and getting consultants in to give an update on a certain topic. I mean, that's fine if you just want to get information on that specific topic, but these people 9 out of 10 times do not have an intimate relation with the organization, and less likely an intimate relation with the board and the dynamics on the board. And if you get people that are connected through an advisory committee for a longer term, you will get that more specific knowledge and more specific advice on how the board could actually deal with this. If we can go to the next slide, Lieselot, we'll go and look at the governance processes. So what are companies doing on governance processes? Well, clearly on top is enhancing risk management. I don't think there is a company in the world that is not looking and reviewing their risk management processes and upgrading it. Some of them, of course, are really out there in terms of how it is already done. But you know, with all these externalities having an impact on, you know, how you do business and how much value you can create and how much value is potentially at risk, companies are really looking at enhancing their risk management. Reviewing governance structures is one that was slightly surprising to us. Surprising in the sense of the 46%. So companies are really looking at, you know, are we still having the right composition of the board? Are we still having the right board committees? Are we still distributing responsibilities between these committees in a way that is really effective? Should we push more of the operational control type of responsibilities into the committees, and should we spend more time as a full board on strategy and strategy review? These are all elements that fall under the category of governance structures, reviewing governance structures. Scenario planning increase has been talked about a lot, and now we see a clear sign back into that companies are actually doing that with 44%. And then, you know, let's just take one out of this, and that is the third one from the bottom, the developing board refreshment strategies. And what we really see is that boards are proactively starting to look at board composition, and is this still the right board composition, given the kind of challenge that we see ahead of us? Should we change that board composition? We even see companies being handling board terms much more flexibly. So there is really things are going on there. Again, just as a snippet of this, and then if you can go to the next one, Lieselot. This year we also looked into, to put it a bit blunt, how happy are boards with management and how happy is management with boards. And it seems there is quite a challenge. I mean, we didn't find any specific. We did go through quite an amount of detail in terms of, you know, can we find what it is specific that they are unhappy about? That's not there. It's a bit all over the place. But a clear sign is that there is definitely improvement for alignment. And the thing that we hear all the time is that, you know, with the current insecurities out there, alignment and also with the activists increasingly finding boards, addressing boards, suing boards even in some cases, the alignment of management and board needs to really be there. And again, one quote from the roundtables here. Claire, did you want to jump in here as well? Because I'm sure you guys see this all the time.
Yes, we are. And I think we're seeing it really around alignment, around risk appetite, and overall strategy in terms of seizing longer term market opportunities. And where we're seeing, I mean, as you said, Ron, alignment is critical for driving performance, but I think where we're seeing it show up practically is where boards don't have confidence that the executive are across these issues in sufficient breadth and future scanning, as the survey shows. We find that they lean overly into the operational details, and this can create the executives becoming more defensive in their interaction for the board, which is clearly counterproductive in terms of an open strategic conversation. And so where we're seeing best practice is where the chair and the chairs of the nomination committee are setting a culture for the board that creates that space for robust debate, which is critically important given the range of perspectives that the boards are having to consider.
Thanks, Claire. Liselot, the next and last slide for this short introduction to the report. We also, through all the conversations that we had with board directors over the past year and the roundtables that we have had, we sort of try to distill, you know, what are now the sort of best practice, big changes that we see, what are leading boards really doing. They are all described in more detail, but these are really the highlights that we have found. The first one really is around, however you want to call it. You can call it purpose, you can call it strategic intent, you can call it vision or mission, it doesn't really matter. But this leading edge boards we see here make a distinction between sort of, you know, what is the North Star? Where are we as an organization? Why do we exist? And where do we want to go? And where do we want to end up? And these companies have this definition, or this definition fall under the responsibility of the full board. And then the strategy, as in, how do we get there? Which steps are we actually taking to go in the direction of this North Star that we have set, is the responsibility of management. And we increasingly see a clear distinction between the two. That actually links to the second and third one, actually, where boards increasingly get intimately and in detail involved in the strategy setting, where, you know, maybe in the old days, and for some companies that is last year, for other companies that's a decade ago, board was just signing off on the strategy and maybe asking a few questions. That's not happening with leading edge boards anymore. The board is really intimately involved in setting the strategy. Horizon scanning, I think we talked about already a little bit. The one that I also think is an interesting one is boards are increasingly, and I think that's a bit also the courage that Claire mentioned earlier, are motivating management to actually drive impact beyond the traditional boundaries of the business, which actually means to, you know, actively look at even working together with competition, or as I just saw announced this morning in the newspapers, where Unilever is going to actively work with a new startup who invented a way to recycle plastics completely. It's a new way, and Unilever is hedging big on this. They want to be involved, clearly, because Unilever has a lot of plastics to recycle. Then the allocation, the capital allocation, and investment, the flexibility in these investments we talked about already a little bit. And the last one we really wanted to mention is really around the organizational culture and actively bridge those things that divide us. There's a lot of work done on this topic by Jeremy Hansen, which is Claire's colleague from the US, and it's really interesting to read about it. There are really companies that, you know, take on these differences and really try to, as a board itself, within the board, but also work with management to embrace the differences and see how they can best go forward with this. And that's also a change that we really see happening with leading edge boards. This is, again, a very short introduction. I think I almost managed in the time we have been given together with Claire. If not, then I apologize, but I think I'm handing over back to you, Liselot.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing this. And just on this topic, we are creating also a blog post where we will add also, I know you're coming out with even more interesting reports from both BCG and Heidrick Struggles and INSEAD. So we're going to collect that into a blog post that is coming up. Thank you so much.
Maybe
for sharing.
that's good that you mentioned that, Lieselot.
Yeah.
You told me not to do any marketing, but in the interest of insights, this year we also very specifically, in the collaboration with Heidrick and INSEAD, we looked into emerging markets. So we have a separate report coming out on the same topics, but focusing on emerging markets early next week.
Thank you so much. And those types of marketing we are allowing because they're really adding value to board members. Now, let me take the opportunity to introduce three fantastic and brave board directors. Susanna Campbell, who has a private equity background. She's both a chair for companies like Soonieus. She's the board director of Stegra. That used to be named H2 Green Steel. She's the board director of Northvolt, Kinnevik, Indutrade, and Estrade. Warm welcome, Susanna. We also have Patricia Rodrigues, who is a non-executive director on two insurance, legal, investment types of companies and infrastructure types of companies. And we're delighted to have also you, also working very internationally. And then we also have Johan, who comes to us from Malaysia, but also works internationally. And he also works on boards, and he also sits on the Institute of Corporate Directors and on the Malaysian Security Commission. So we think we have a very good spread across the world, and we are very delighted to have you joining us. Warm welcome. So I thought I'd start with actually just getting a quick comment from each of you on the key points that stood out to you. Do you want to start, Susanna?
Yes, thank you. Very happy to start. I think, obviously, I agree with many of the observations in the report. To me, this societal responsibility of a company is not only in its own right. I think it's becoming increasingly clear that if we're going to, given the climate crisis and everything that's going on, if we're going to have a world to work in and build profitable businesses in, this is just something that we have to do. It's not it's nothing you can choose to opt out from. It's something that you have to do. Personally, I'm sometimes surprised to see that people choose to do either large boards or to work with startups. I think, for me anyway, one of the key ways to actually do my own, understand where things are heading and see the key trends is to also be very close to the startup community. Because if there is an opportunity and when large corporates leave some kind of white space out there, startups will be super fast to see that and to try to build a business out of it. So for me, staying on top of the key trends that I see coming, I do that at least partly by staying close to the startup community and understand what's happening there. And then, of course, I can't not comment the extremely challenging environment that we're in. Things are changing at some kind of extreme rapid pace. The world is very fast moving. I think geopolitics, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, that would not have ended up in my top 3 agenda items for a board. But right now, it's something that is challenging many companies, and it's moving so fast. Just looking at the world and its dependence on tariffs and other types of things that are changing rapidly is one. But then I think, at least from a European context, we tend to want to think of the world as having a level playing field, and that this kind of open trade that the system that we're part of is very important. And I agree, but there is no level playing field. That's just, it's something that we say, but the world is definitely not level playing field. If we see what China is doing and how they're kind of very, very effective and moving ahead in strategic industries and so on, I think we're kidding ourselves if we think it's a level playing field, and that obviously creates even more challenges for a board. I think I'll probably start there.
Thank you so much, Sanna, and I fully agree with you. I think it's very good to stay close to different types of ownership, actually. Johan, what stood out to you from this report?
Well, first of all, I really want to congratulate Ron, Claire, and their firms for doing this report. You know, I'm a bit jaded with all these surveys that companies put out. You know, and very often they're just sort of marketing tools. But this is a good one, I must say, and hits me just at the right time. And if anything, your slides. You know, I would say redo the report to incorporate your slides, because the slides you've shown really help to bring out the essence of the report. Yeah, so many things actually. I'm looking forward to your emerging markets one. Obviously, I'm from Malaysia and I operate in the ASEAN region more, and I'd like to see a bit more about what my fellow directors there are thinking about. What I found is we're trying to sort of get interest in, especially climate change, going in Southeast Asia is uphill struggles. I would be surprised if there are too many directors who really are connected, apart from Malaysia and Singapore, where I think regulators have pushed that. So we must not underestimate the importance of the regulator community. Regulators pushing that, us, and kind of us arriving at it, at these conclusions at the same time are important. One thing that you know, getting the right board members on is hugely important. Trying to be strategic and not just say, oh, a lawyer left, I must get another lawyer, which is the obvious way to do it. That's proven very difficult. Ron, be pleased. My chairman is a BCG former partner, and my nomination committee chairman is another former BCG partner, and I must say they are great. And the chairman, in fact, was until recently the youngest member of the board. Now that in Southeast Asia or anywhere in the global south, I think is very unusual, to have the youngest member of the board also the chairman, and that helped us really to get moving. So much of what you said, you know, I'm very impressed, I must say, that there are directors out there who are like fully satisfied and strongly agree that they've got everything under control. Because I don't know whether I'd want to be with them on the board or avoid being with them on the board. I'm not really sure which, because I can tell you I'm not fully sure. And I think that my board, there's a lot of trust, and I think we've built up trust between management and board, partly through this young chairman and so on, but partly through pushing culture, etc., and open debate, but yet holding it, you know, holding ourselves in check. I think trust is hugely important in this, because we are all learning. We've got to understand that nobody has the answers, and we, in the past, I think CEOs have felt they have to have the answer, otherwise they're not fulfilling their duty as a CEO. But in this, you know, AI, sustainability, what's going to happen with geopolitics anywhere in the world, you know, who has all the answers? And I've got a CEO who says, you know, gosh, holds up his hands when he doesn't have the answers, and also owns up when he hasn't fully sorted out some area, and that is refreshing. And I think that's important. So I'd say I've mentioned those things. Trust. I also like the idea of the advisory board. I was on one once, and it does work like that. You can come in and, in a way, you can whack them between the eyes, because you don't have to worry too much about the interpersonal give and take and so on that you've got in a board. You know, you can come in straight and tell them what they've not been doing, etc., in your opinion. So then they can kick you out when they don't want you anymore. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johan. And I think it's very interesting with the advisory board. In all of my boards, we have temporary committees just to trying to grab all of these kind of new topic areas. So we just don't wait too long, which is really interesting. Now I look forward to hear, what did you find, Patricia?
Well, thank you. And I try not to replicate other comments, but I subscribe to all of them. So thank you. And great work. Not a marketing tool, as you said, Johan, but actually a very informative tool, which I've already distributed to my boards and committees. Some of it to act as inspiration, other to perhaps act as a little bit of competitive pressure on those. But it was a pleasant surprise and a positive surprise to see that actually, I think it's the majority of the board directors now think that there is a plan to handle sustainability. Doesn't mean that they are comfortable with the whole integration. I saw the nuance on the questions because that's quite important to understand. What are the facts answering? And if there is a plan to address sustainability, perhaps you're a little bit driven by regulation. So they are content that they are complying with regulation. Doesn't mean they are being so courageous and thinking about where they can be leading on sustainability, because you really lead on sustainability when it's fully integrated rather than just complying with regulation. So maybe what they're saying is that, okay, we can comply with regulation, we can measure the emissions from a climate perspective, but maybe they are a little bit behind on the S, maybe the G is changing. So that was, anyway, an interesting revelation for me, a positive development, and hope for the boards, and especially for emerging markets, and potentially for what's coming with the US changing policy and potential regulation in the next 4 years. So that's the first point. The second point, I think it serves as, rather than to be scared, as a wake-up call for everybody and for boards and for C-suite to get on with it and get up to speed with AI. It is a revolution. It's here. It's not a gimmick, as many potential dinosaurs refer to it. It's not a gimmick. It is, for those that understand modeling, understand what LLMs are, this is here to stay, and this is here to revolutionize our business. So get on with it, as I think Johan was mentioning earlier as well. If you don't get on with it, you'll be lagging. So even if it is just to get up to speed. So I think it was, what is it, only 36% of the board directors felt that they are comfortable with where they are on AI. And that's already a great percentage. But I share that concern as well. So I think it's a good wake-up call. And that's what these studies are for here, is for reflection. And as well, what actions can we do in our boards, in our committees, with the responsibility that we have at our level. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I will, in the interest of time, actually directly go into the key question around which we will also debate later on in the breakout rooms. And that is, how do you make the different parts of these strategic dilemmas around sustainability integrated into the business? And I was also happily surprised to see that 44% is going to increase and actually do some scenario planning, because we're finding in a lot of other discussions that they might say that they do it. They definitely do it in banks because they're regulated to, but for the rest. So how do you see that it's getting translated into the business strategy? And maybe I can start with you, Johan.
It's a bit of a struggle, I must say, but I feel, well, in the company I'm at, you find that it's being driven by a number of factors, including the customer. So customers are, in a real estate company, customers are demanding buildings or houses that they kind of agree with, if you like, in terms of the sustainability of what's gone into them. And I think there are very few people on earth who are more conservative than real estate managers, people who build buildings. They want to do it as they've always done it. It takes a lot of, it takes dynamite to get them to change. And one of the things that I've noticed, I've asked, how come you're doing this? And they said, oh, the customers coming in asking these things. Well, one thing I should mention is in the global south. I know that do we still use the term global south? But in the Western world, you talk a lot about immigration and migration, migrant workers, etc. I think what you should understand also is that there's a huge amount of migrant workers migrating within the south to south, and not touching Europe, North America, and UK, etc. And the ideas of how these workers are treated is coming more and more to the fore. And so this is an area where is being pushed in particular in Southeast Asia. We've had a number of companies, particularly in some manufacturing areas like gloves, but also in palm oil, where their products have been effectively banned by the US. But their products banning the US is probably not a big deal, but the sort of reputational aspect of that is bad. So they've had to struggle and spend a huge amount of money to get off the banning, and to sort out how they treat their workers, and that has, that has influenced obviously hundreds of other companies to also sort themselves out. And I hope that I'd love it if the emerging markets version of this report could actually might actually look at that as well, the S, if you like, in ESG. And this is something which again, where it's not naturally that's something you want to put people in Southeast Asia want to spend time and money on. It's not something they wake up in the morning, but there are influences outside, reputational problems. You see another company has a problem with, let's say, modern slavery issues, etc. You rush back and make sure that your company is clean. And so a lot of time and effort is being spent in these areas in particular, eliminating modern slavery, etc., and all that kind of thing, and making sure workers are being treated properly. Very often we have the laws. In Malaysia, which we have all the laws in place, but very often companies flout them. And so now with the rise of interest in sustainability, companies don't want their share price to be hit by to be hit by a reputational issue, and that pushes the S part or different parts of ESG onto the strategic into the company strategy discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Johan. Susanna, I know you and I talked about actually a lot of incumbents leaving big parts of the kind of value creation opportunities actually open. So how do you get that integrated, and how do you stay balanced between the E, S, and G into the business strategy?
Interesting question. I think if we start looking at climate and the climate question, in my opinion, well, I guess I've spent the last 8 years mainly focusing on businesses built around the whole idea of climate. I've been surprised to see how so many large corporates are not kind of innovative enough and pushing the boundaries enough on the climate question. Because in my mind, this is one of the biggest business opportunities, is the biggest investment and business opportunity of my lifetime, I believe, along with AI, I would say. And so many people have been very passive. And I think maybe that was a consequence of a lot of the ESG work was starting off with ticking a bunch of boxes and kind of complying with things and writing policies, rather than saying, okay, if the world is heading this way, what does that mean for my business strategy and my value creation? And there are tremendous value creation opportunities out there, and that's actually why I in the end end up an entrepreneur as well, because I see all these white spots being left open for startups, and in the end I chose to pursue one of those myself even. So I think there can be a lot more curiosity and courage around the climate question, because that one is not, well, it's partly about ticking boxes, but mainly I think it's about a business opportunity. And I think when you turn that mindset and you think of it as kind of the way to win in the coming 10, 20, 30 years, I think that's when I've seen also large corporates really start moving, when you realize that otherwise you will basically become, or you risk become obsolete, and suddenly you're not a steel producer, you're a brown steel producer, and who wants to be a brown steel producer when there's plenty of green steel? So I think just kind of being a bit early on the ball and thinking about it as a business opportunity rather than an obligation and something very cumbersome. Then of course you have other, ESG has a way broader way broader criteria as well that Johan was talking about, and some of them are more challenging to think of as a business opportunity. But I do firmly believe, obviously, that companies doing the right thing, even in the other letters other than climate, it will be a competitive advantage done right. And I think, to me, this is about how do you build a sustainable competitive advantage for the coming 10, 20, 30 years? How do you future-proof your business? And I think all the letters in ESG just have to be part of that, because otherwise you will others will win, because others will do it. So I
And
guess
I think yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Susanna. I think it's so refreshing. Patricia, if you look at how do you really get it into the strategy?
Yeah.
What is your experience on that?
As a former engineer, I really think that we shouldn't reinvent the wheel when it's there. And it's clearly actually what this report shows is that we've made good progress on the sustainability when you compare the report from last year versus this year. So what's working? And then how can we deploy that, for example, for GenAI, as you're referring to, 44% already using resources. That was a good surprise. What's working is that, precisely as Susanna revealed, when you leave those values from leadership and you lead from the top, not when you put a silo there, look, you are the ESG team, you are the ESG committee, and so on, and you siloed it from the company. That's really not working, and many companies have shown that. The same I'm seeing with AI, already putting it on the IT silo, totally the wrong approach. That's not how you're going to drive the competitive advantage, which was one of your questions from the study. So incorporate that in the values, ensure that you have the right senior leadership team. For example, in the sustainability, a lot of senior teams were refreshed, and boards as well. Claire helped on that. So do you have the right C-suite and the right boards for taking advantage of the AI disruption, but also being very close to what disruption is happening in geopolitics? So start there, because the culture comes from the top. And if you're just parking it into the specialism, the special matters silo, that's not going to achieve the results you want.
Thank you so much. We are going to get our participants engaged. So you have 2 questions you should answer. And the first one is your board efficiently addressing sustainability while actually creating the long-term value that Susanna and all of our panels referred to? And on the second one, are you efficiently addressing Gen AI while creating long-term value? So we'll love for you to answer that, and then you will shortly go into the breakout rooms. We would now ask the participants who are not planning to be in the breakout rooms actually to leave, because we are now going to put you into a really fab discussion. And when we do, you will also have the chance to end up actually together with some of our panelists and presenters here. But in that sense, you will not be able to actually use them to lead the discussion. They are there merely as participants as well. So we'll give you another 5 seconds to answer the poll, and then we will get back and have our panel to just comment on it. So we're closing the poll, and we have the results. And the results you can all see, and you can scroll in the window yourself from the first to the second question. So I think I'll ask maybe Ron to comment on the first one, on the strategic integration.
Sure. It's actually, of course, groups like this, you always have to be a bit careful, because they are biased to a certain extent, which is good news. It's not necessarily bad, but yeah. So fully agree. I'm not surprised that it is low. I would have expected the disagree to be slightly higher, actually. If we look at, if we distill this from the numbers we have in our research, the disagree would come out slightly higher, and the agree and neutral, yeah, it sounds about right, but the top one and the bottom one are slightly surprising to me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Let's go to the second question, which is on AI. And Sanna, with your competence, I'd love for you to comment on this second one.
Yeah, I think with AI, I think there was a lot of enthusiasm a few years ago, and everyone was expecting this to happen so quickly. And then there was obviously a lot of basic research done. Whereas now, again, when I listen to the startup community, I see that now is actually when it's happening. Now we're starting to see that solutions that are kind of B2B type solutions are coming up. And I think we'll actually see a huge change in the coming 5 years. So I hear from some larger companies that they go, this AI thing, we looked at that a lot a few years ago, but not much is happening.
Right.
But as usual, when it's a new technology, it actually takes a little while before the real application and the real use cases come. And I think that that's what we're seeing now. So now is the time to be forward-leaning and actually look for those applications that are being made available, largely by startups, but also by some large companies, obviously.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that. Now everybody will get a chance to discuss the topic, and we will put you in. So the person who actually arrives last into the room will be the chair, and he or she will appoint the vice chair. Spend a short time to introduce yourself. This is also a fantastic opportunity to network. The topic you're going to discuss is what board practices contribute to a more proactive integration? Not company, not other things. What board practices actually makes a more proactive integration? And what interventions should boards do? From that, we are now opening up the rooms, and we look forward to see you in a short while. Thank you, everybody. Warm welcome back. I know it was too short, but at least you had a chance to actually look at the question a bit more. So we're going to have a short feedback, and we'll ask you to put that feedback in the chat. So one good board practice that you could think of, please share it in the chat. And then I'd like to bring the panel back in and actually look at what we had in terms of discussions. And I actually want to bring one topic up that Claire shared with us before we started this, and we haven't mentioned yet. So are you there, Claire?
I am.
Yeah. So can you just mention what happened yesterday in US?
Yes, of course. So one of the things I'm part of our leadership team for a US listed company. So I'm also, as an advisor, I'm working with clients with it, but also living it as we continue to navigate the polarization of the ESG topic, particularly in the US, and how we navigate that thoughtfully and stay true to our values, but also being mindful of regulatory dynamics and shareholder aspirations. And yesterday, and I was going to put it in the chat actually, 10 Republican states launched a lawsuit against BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, and various others against egregious woke capitalism associated with their policies, particularly focused on coal. And I think it's going to be interesting for us, fascinating for us as advisors and as board members, to work to think that through on how that impacts us if we have significant US footprint, but also what our shareholder base is, and also where that shareholder base is headquartered, whether that's Texas or California, causes increasing complexity as well. So there's a lot to digest for boards.
There is certainly a lot to digest, and maybe I could just ask, maybe Patricia, do you want to start? How do you see this geopolitical dimension now impacting the sustainability and the AI actually for your boards and the boards that you are close to?
I think we can't ignore what's going on in the North American market because it is a significant capital market, not the leading one. So it's good of Claire to have flagged this. It's potentially going to delay the great momentum that we had because the IRA had really increased the momentum with the participation and bringing back the states back to the COP. Probably will come out. So we can't ignore it. I think Europe and the UK, it's a question of survival to continue the decarbonization. So they will not change. They might even accelerate. And China is actually leading a lot of the deployment. 50% of the solar deployment comes from China. We can't forget that. They are decarbonizing as well. So I think you'll have an access, a different change of geopolitical access. On the other hand, on the AI, I see the boards in the States a little bit more advanced. I don't know if the surveys saw this than UK, Europe. So again, another wake-up call from this study to get on board with that.
And I know we had a question from before also on the topic that you mentioned, Susanna, on the collaboration startups and incumbents. So how do you see that, and also this geopolitical dimension?
Well, overall, I think it is increasingly important, both in climate, but very much so in AI, to kind of see what the startups are doing. I think trying to find new innovative ways of working together as a large corporate and a startup is very important. In the past, that has obviously not been super successful because the large corporates tend to either want to eat up a startup completely, or they kind of struggle with the interaction. But I hope to see more large corporates really trying to stay close to the startup community. And not only through some kind of CVC type setup, but also strategically to really take them into the boardroom and kind of try to see what it is they see. And I think trying to listen to that sector as well when you do your scenario analysis and when you do your planning, strategic planning for the future. So hoping to see way more in that field.
Thank you. Johan, what is your reflection now when you've been into the discussion and actually knowing what you know? How do we make sure that the Global South continues to engage in the sustainability and build it in, and actually pick up some of these kind of opportunity-oriented views that Susanna talked about?
Yeah, but I think the Global South is going to continue down this path of looking at sustainability reporting, etc., because the regulator community is all linked now, and all of them are doing this, basically come out with the same set of rules. So that's an important factor. In terms of opportunity, I think you probably find us a bit slow in that respect, because many of our countries do a lot of work is essentially exporting goods, and so a lot of what we are doing is actually in response to the pressures put on us by the buyers. So I know of I think of sustainability initiatives in Malaysia, Singapore as being the preserve of big listed companies. In actual fact, there's a huge amount of work done by smaller unlisted companies, because they are in fact more in tune with EU rules, European Union rules, etc., because they are exporting to those countries, and so you'll find very often their factories are pristine, their workers are well looked after, etc., and they're not a listing in sight. So
I think that's Go ahead.
No, I'll stop there.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting. One of the things I made myself to get it in focus in one of my boardrooms was to actually ask them to summarize what is our 10 biggest customers doing and what will that mean to us. And that really stimulated up a really good discussion on that topic. Patricia, what do you see in terms of actually changing board practices? Where are we? What do we need to change?
I think clearly what we've learned is that on the sustainability front, it has worked. It's not working on AI, and we're waking up on the geopolitical disruption and the number of wars escalating by the minute, although there is some peace talks, which I'm very glad to hear. I think bringing humility as a value to the board, rather than potentially historical arrogance, is extremely important. If we think about values, you've mentioned, Susanna, you've mentioned courage, hope. I would say humility is extremely important in the board. And when we don't know, to just be humble enough to not know. That's what my PhD told me, is that we know nothing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so many interesting things. We actually talked a bit about maybe doing a follow-up of this entire discussion in beginning of 2025, just because we don't have time to go into all of the interesting areas. And maybe we could also have a bit of a focus on the emerging market when that report has come out, Ron. So I want to give you the chance to actually give a really as concrete, just thin recommendation to this fantastic community. What do you think that they could do slightly better than what they're doing today? Ron, do you want to start?
Sure, happy to start. I think maybe on your suggestion on emerging markets and the combination of what Johan was just saying on regulation. I mean, one of the things that we really found is that many non-EU organizations underestimate the impact of CSRD. And there was one which I thought was quite interesting, board member from a family-owned company in Jakarta during a roundtable, who is in the packaging industry. And they clearly saw this, I mean, the new regulation from Europe, and taking that on as a competitive advantage, saying, we are making sure that we comply with all the rules that our clients have to comply with, because that will make us a long-term supplier above us. Anyway, yeah, my simple suggestion, and people have maybe heard me saying it before, but to me it is the most simple way of doing things, is in the board and getting the board along, not only in sustainability but also in the other two, is make it very, very relevant to the organization. So the example I've been using for a number of years now is I've been advising a board member who chairs the sustainability committee. He at some stage said, you know, the rest of the board is not really taking this serious. How can we make them realize that this is serious business? And we just simply, this was on a bank, we simply took their mortgage portfolio and we overlaid their mortgage portfolio with the IPCC projections on flooding and droughts. And we could, this was a fairly easy thing to do, and we could see bottom line impact from a low, medium and high scenario on what that would mean on their mortgage portfolio. And that opened the eyes of other board members. So make it concrete, make it link these things to bottom line impact, to market share impact, to, you know, the traditional things that boards are engaged with.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Claire, what would your quick recommendation be?
My very quick recommendation, well, Ron, I think going first was lucky. I agree with everything Ron says. I think it's very, very interesting, and actually tying it down to tangible value creation, particularly in the world of politicized ESG. It's got to be around actually embedding in what is going to drive long-term sustainable value in all the metrics in which we all hold dear. I also think for me, and you're not going to be surprised, I say that this is for me a question of leadership. Yeah. And in a world where the what is so uncertain, it's the who and the how that's going to be the matter, and the levers, right? The right board structure, right competence, but the right culture. I love what Patricia said about humbleness, the combination of wisdom, courage, humility. but having the right people in the right roles, leading in the right way with the right culture.
Thank you so much. Now you have only 20 seconds each. What would you recommend, Patricia?
Very quickly, integration. Do not allow these key topics to be run by silos or in silos.
Very good. Thank you. Johan?
I think put it into the terms of reference of committees, etc., so that they have responsibility to look into AI. I thoroughly recommend having a sustainability committee if you don't have one, and get the TR right, and make sure that human rights and also health and safety is worked in there as well.
Thank you. And Susanna?
Yeah, repeating a bit what the others have said, but seeing it as a business opportunity, I think, is the key way to actually get it truly integrated into the strategy. And then I also agree with Patricia's comment on humility. I think in the world of AI, the human aspect of things, leadership, being truly human, will have increased value in general.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. We will now ask our collaborating colleague to share with us a short summary, and she will also talk a bit about what you can do with INSEAD, and we're going to come back after that and just say some short things. Fernanda will share what you can do with Boards Impact Forum. Over to you, Sonja.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liselott. And first of all, thanks to all our distinguished speakers and practitioners, board members and experts here, and for the insights. And of course, thanks to the audience who have been very engaged in sharing as well. So very difficult to actually summarize everything, but I'll give some snapshot of what we heard, some of the key takeaways we have heard, but also some of what we have observed lately and what we heard from board members. The first one is that geopolitical and AI ecosystem governance are to be considered and integrated within also the sustainability and all of these new, whether we call them new topics, but some of them are there, but evolving topics, evolving matters. So these cannot be treated in isolation. That's the first point. The second one is that boards have the responsibility, first of all, to get more involved in the strategy development and not leaving it to the management who comes up with the strategy. So scenario planning, all of these, and raising the questions to the management and working with the management. More and more this is coming up. Also, they have the responsibility to build a resilient organization, which is about flexibility, about adaptability, which are the key attributes nowadays for such an evolving and changing world and, basically business environment and disruptions. Also, NEDs are thinking, what we have seen is that NEDs currently and non-executive directors are thinking twice before taking an additional mandate or before getting an additional board seat. Because what's happening is that there is increased pressure and scrutiny coming up. There was a mention of regulation coming along and changing. There is also increased liability, not only from the corporate side, which it was mentioned about risk, but also from the personal side. Then there is the expansion of the scope, the speed of change and complexity. All of these actually are putting a new topic that we see as well, and we will be discussing in the future on a webinar and on an event as well, which is the psychological distress that boards are is given everything is coming onto into the boardroom, and of course it's for them to steward, to lead, and which becoming challenging as well. And the last one, what we have seen as well, is that remuneration question is coming up actually about the boards, because what happened is that the scope has been expanding, but the remuneration and the amount of work has been also more pressured, but then the remuneration question remains, raised by board members. And the last one is, of course, we have heard a lot about training, upskilling. Yes, I was in one of the group where there was a mention that the company organizes actually specific training for boards and executives to come together. But what we see as well from the INSEAD perspective, many board members are taking their own training and development from their own budget. So it's not coming from the board or whatever the organization they're serving. So personally, they are very much engaged and they are looking for more training and more, of course, development. That's overall the takeaways, and sharing about what's coming up. AI was discussed in this, of course, based on the report on boards need to upgrade and learn more about what does it mean. So at the INSEAD, we will be delivering AI and board workshop. This is starting in March. So you will hear more about this, and these are the faculty that UC will be delivering. It's online, half a day over 5 sessions. So I'll not go in detail as I look at the timing. Liselott.
Yes, thank you so much. Well,
there.
actually, I thought I'd ask Fernanda to just share quickly what's
Super
happening.
quickly, because we are so happy to inform everyone, to let you all know that we just got our board oversight of sustainability for value creation, courageous leadership in a disrupted world. So it really fits with a lot of what was said here today. And we just got it now to be an approved training program by the Climate Governance Initiative. So this is a very special milestone for us that we really wanted to share with everyone. Check the next upcoming event from CGI on COP29, and please join us also for our Balanced Bridge program. Really exciting. So it's a little bit of a extra positive energy, a little bit every day during the month of December, to make sure that this whole thing about courageous leadership, resilience, etc. is not just words, but that we can actually put it into practice. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, and an extra thank you to our presenters, Ron and Claire, to our fantastic panel with Susanna and Johan and Patricia, to all of you here that has been engaging in the topic. And what could you say? Go out, be brave, help our companies to actually have a focus on the long term, and to inspire your board colleagues to move on. Thank you so much, everybody. And a special one thanks to Sonia for the third year collaboration on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a very good day.